All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another LinkedIn Live. Well, not just live on LinkedIn, actually. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, everything. I should say Nemarin Live, I guess. How are you doing? Obviously, I'm not Pete. Pete is off today. He's having a well-earned day off. So you're stuck with me today. But listen, there's one thing I want to talk about today, which is editing, which is a pretty fundamental part of the production process. So the way that we tend to work is we've got sort of 3 stages to the filmmaking process: pre-production, prepping it all, writing, etc., production, actually filming, and then editing, post-production, where it all comes together. But it can be a little bit of a mystery. I personally think when it's done right, you don't even notice it. But it's extremely valuable for clients. And it's a lot more than you might think. So after all the prep and all the planning, and after a busy shoot, what happens next is a question for today. And to help me answer that question, translate the jargon, and teach you all about the world of editing is Nemarin's own senior editor, Mr. Ian Day. Hello, Ian.
Hey, Tom.
How are you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's Friday.
It is Friday. Happy Friday. So everyone, as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to comment wherever you are, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc., and get involved in the conversation. But Ian, let's just take things way back a little bit and just reset. If I were to bump into you in a pub, remember them? Remember pubs? If I were to bump into you in a pub and ask you what you did for a living, and I didn't know anything about video, what would you say to me?
I'd just say that if they didn't know anything about video, or they didn't know anything about video editing, if they didn't know anything about video, I'd think they were a time traveler, and assume that they're very confused by everything. But if they were to ask me what I do in the production as a video editor, I'd just tell them that I fundamentally put the story together, whether that be with imagery or with dialogue or through a scripted narrative. It's basically putting the story together in a way that's so seamless that people don't really notice it in the end. It's something that is inherently, it's a feeling. Great.
A feeling. So I suppose some people might say, well, isn't the story kind of all sort of figured out in the writing and the storyboarding stage of things? So what is the difference between finding the narrative in the editing process and finding then the narrative in the writing process? How does that kind of differ?
A lot of times, especially with the advent of digital media, people have access to film things like they never did before. There's cameras that can just shoot and put hours and hours of stuff on a card, whereas before you had tapes that had a limited time span and film, which was very expensive. So these days, people will shoot an interview that's 2 hours long, and obviously you don't want to make a 2-hour-long video of just one person. So you want to be able to find the story within that larger structure of footage. So it's really about knowing what you're going for at the beginning, having an idea where you want to be. But the editor's role is to help the director really find what they didn't see when first shooting it, and bringing those elements together, the editor's creativity and the director's creativity together to put together something that they both are happy with in the end, and the client's happy with in the end.
Brilliant. So it's kind of, so you're almost a sort of a fresh pair of eyes, like a sort of a narrative consultant coming in later on in the process. Are you? Do you always come in later in the process, or are you ever there from the beginning, or where does your kind of role begin?
Well, at Nemarin, I'm often involved early on. as we're a very collaborative company, we're all talking to each other. We all sort of know what's going on with every project, and it does really help as an editor to be there, right from the start, the genesis of a project, so I can sort of give advice into how to shoot a certain interview, questions maybe to lead them into something, because I can tell at the beginning of the project that maybe it would be good if there was a story arc that went like this. And obviously you're not always going to be able to push the narrative in that direction, but if you are able to, get surprises out of it, it might help the production in the end, and generate a video that's 10 times better than you originally went into it.
Perfect. So let's take a little look at some of your recent work so that we can all see Ian in action. There's obviously a lot of stuff that we do here at Nemarin, as you can tell from the show reel, and if you're kind of following any of Pete's LinkedIn posts, you'll see that we regularly share just examples of cool stuff that we've been working on. Ian is he's our senior editor, and he's pretty instrumental in how most of that comes together. So this particular project is something that we made for Revolut a little while ago. It's about a 60-second, would you describe it as maybe a case study video, I guess, profile film of a company called Bettable. So let's take a look at this film for Revolut.
As a little kid running through my dad's shop, I was touching and feeling different fabrics. Doing the same business now really takes me back to my childhood. My name is Joe Scumley, and I'm the founder of Bettable. Bettable jumps the middleman to offer you luxury bedding at fair price. As an entrepreneur, the biggest challenge you face is time. It's spending hours and hours on linking and syncing every single transaction. Automating that is very important. Revolut synchronization with our accountancy software allowed us to save hours of work. We invest that money back into our business to grow our marketing channel to reach to a wider audience. Not to have that time would be really frustrating. It would really hurt us as a business. Revolut puts our mind at ease, and that's why we can sleep better. Maybe we're in the same business.
Nice. So that was a little thing that you edited for Revolut Business. So maybe let's just could you take me through the process? Where do you start with something like this? Presumably, so Juan, who we all know and love, directed, produced that. He's gone away. He's done the shoot. He's come back with a hard drive of footage. You've obviously been there, sort of in the pre-production meeting, so you know kind of what to expect, but you might not know exactly what sort of shots you're going to be there, or exactly what the contributor is going to say on the day. He comes back with his hard drive and he gives it to you. Where do you start? How does it all work?
First of all, you'll get the footage, and you want to organize it. So there'll be some footage, which is all the B-roll of him at his computer, just sort of working. As you can see here, James is behind the scenes pulled up a project that we were working on about 6 months ago for CNBC and Credit Suisse. Whereas as you can see on the right, about left here, it's all just organized. You got raw footage. You got your graphics, you got your assets from the client. You want to organize everything for days of shooting, A cam, B cam, put them together. What I do is I just make timelines. I put the interviews together. So these are all the interview subjects, so that you have all the interviews in one place and you can go through them and find your selects. And then you have your B-roll, which is, and another one, this is 6 months old, so I can't really remember what it is, but they're B-roll selects. So this is all just the interstitial stuff that you'll put over top of everything, and to color the narrative with, these guys working in their everyday life. And as you can see here on the timeline, there's different colors, and Premiere allows you to label everything with different colors, and there's a ton of them. And that's just to allow you to sort of categorize. Like in this certain instance, this blue is all of these guys talking about their company, Screening Eagle. It's all them explaining what they do, the structure of the company, what it's intended to do. And this over here, this red, is them talking about their partnership with Credit Suisse. So it's just it's organizing the narrative in a structure or just in blocks that you can sort of like put together to create something where the narrative flows from intro to everything, intro of all the subjects to intro of the company to their relationship with Credit Suisse, and then like a bunch of comments at the end of just how well the symbiosis has worked. And with Bettable, it was a similar thing. You're making a profile of a company. You want to start off with introducing the person. You want to get into what his everyday life is, an introduction of what his company does, and how the partnership with Revolut has benefited him. And then a colorful, exclamation at the end of everything's worked well, and you should buy into this product as well.
Great.
And as an editor, you also know what things to avoid. Everybody gets a part of an interview that maybe I don't want him saying that, so you just toss it away and put it in your garbage bin.
So are you generally working from a script or a storyboard, or do you have anything to work from other than the kind of prior agreements of what you've spoken about with the producer or the director before and the footage? Do you have like a guideline?
Sometimes there'll be a brief. I think most of the time there isn't a script, and that diverges a whole heck of a lot from when I started back in Canada, where I would do a corporate film and the director would be right there in the studio with me, and before we even sat down to edit, he will have gotten every piece of footage transcribed, and he will have done a paper edit of everything beforehand. These days, because everybody's like running and gunning, and there's so much need for video content out there, I think the editor's role has changed quite a bit, and oftentimes they're conducting the whole story, and they're part and part the director, because it's their job to construct the story based on just a paragraph brief.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what I like to tell myself.
So it's a lot more of it's not just a case of putting everything in order. There's creativity, there's storytelling, there's kind of every part of it is involved.
Yeah. I think the role of the editor has changed quite a bit. I mean, and you see it because there's a need for the editor to have quite a few different skills in After Effects and in Premiere and in Photoshop, whereas like 15 years ago, that requirement wasn't even necessary at all. Sure.
So how long does it take you to edit a video?
That's a very difficult question to ask. It's some projects can take 6 months to a year, and this project here, I think from the start of shooting to the end delivery took a couple months, part because this was shot in multiple places with multiple people and in the middle of a pandemic, so probably took a bit longer than it needed to be. But this also required a number of different versions, and that's also what's changed for an editor these days. Before it was you're making this video for television, and now you're making this version for Instagram and Facebook, and there's a US version of this and a German version of this, and so the way that the world has expanded and everybody's in communication with each other just means there's more work to do.
Brilliant. So that reversioning is an interesting one. So you're not just cutting one video, you're cutting a whole suite of different things. So there's a real kind of, when the editor's involved, that's when the sort of the client's investment really begins to pay off in terms of deliverables and things for Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So where does it start? Where do you start kind of making these cut downs? Do you start with the hero film, or do you have everything planned out individually, or what does that process look like?
I definitely put the big film together first, because within that you'll have your 90-second cut down, your 60-second cut down, your 15-second, and those things become obvious. And at least to me, when you've been doing this for so long, you know what the best parts are. You know exactly what the client wants to hear when they open a 15-second video based on a longer piece. You just know, I don't know how to explain it further than that. It's just sort of an instinctual thing that, oh, this little snippet's got to go in the 15-second version because it's the best thing anybody said throughout the whole interview, and it just is the best selling point for this client that could possibly be there in the 15-second version.
Almost like if you could sum up that campaign, the client's campaign, in one line, then that would be the sort of core line that you want in each of the individual videos.
Yeah, it's like what's the best bite of this meal? It's like there's a big meal. It's a 15-course meal, but what's the best bite that you can give somebody?
Got it. So it's obviously the time spent on a project can vary quite a lot, as we've just discussed.
Yeah.
But if you're making a 30-second video, a 60-second video, on the one hand, but you're also making a 15-minute documentary for another client over here. If a client came to you and said, well, our 60-second video is only 60 seconds, so it shouldn't take you very long to edit. Is that correct? Is it the shorter the film, the quicker it takes to edit, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, if it's all about the investment on how good they want it to be. It's especially if they shoot as much footage as I have here on my timeline, it's going to take longer to make that 60-second version perfect, because you want to have a 60-second version that is the complete encapsulation of a 6-minute video, which it can be difficult. But I mean, that bettable film, just to estimate, to put together a version 1 of that from the footage coming into my hands would probably take a couple of days. It's the first day to organize everything and just to go through the interview and pulling your selects. Second day to start putting the pieces together, putting a color correct on it, and making it making it look good for the client to see the first pass.
Sure. And so what kind of value do clients get from spending longer in the edit? Because I know that the brands, agencies, media owners, like we said earlier, everyone needs their content to kind of get done, get out. They're excited to publish it, especially if they've been on the shoot and they've seen the rushes, and they're really excited about the footage, and we've had this big build up. If they were to kind of come and say, Tommy, and we really want this basically tomorrow, what is the value in encouraging clients to spend a little longer in the edit, rather than kind of rushing things out the door in just a day?
Rushing things through the door in a day is never a good option in my mind. You want people to sit with it and pay attention to it. I notice with projects, especially this Credit Suisse project or a project we did like Tremors, it's a matter of being able to have a version, step away from it for a little bit, and not look at it for a while, and then come back to it, and you'll realize things that you didn't see the first time you watched it. You will see oh, this could be moved over here, and this could seamlessly. It happens to me all the time, because when you're flooded with it, when you're just drowning in the footage, and you put your version 1 together, you want to just put it in a place where you can be happy with the narrative, and then step away from a bit, have time to empty your mind of it, and come back to it, and you'll see things that you didn't the first time, and it'll help come together. That's how every major motion picture gets made. Every piece of content comes together like that, in that disconnecting yourself from the piece of work for a little bit helps in the end.
So editing isn't just about putting everything in the right order. There's little what's the word, nuances to the way that the frames land, the way that the clips join, whether we put this bit of B-roll here or a few frames later.
Yeah,
that all plays an impact, right?
And it's like inspiration hits when you least expect it. Like in any job, you just need to put it away for a second, and then when you're cooking dinner one night, you'll be like, oh, that one section could come earlier, or that B-roll could play like this. It'll just, if you try to force it and you're drowning in it, you'll sometimes never see it.
Got it. So let's take a little pause here, and we've got a couple of minutes to have a look at something that we made a while ago. This was a few years now. This was something that we put together for NBC Universal's when they launched their Columbo YouTube channel. So this was the classic detective show Columbo that we all know and love. And there was an existing fan base, and they wanted to grow that fan base and reintroduce people to the world of Columbo. So they needed an overview video for their YouTube channel, and this is what we made for them.
Who is the greatest TV detective of all time? Here are some clues. He wears the best clothes.
That coat, that coat, that coat.
He drives the best car. He has the best catchphrase.
One more thing. Oh, listen, there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about. Oh, there's one more thing, sir.
Yep, you guessed it. Columbo.
Good morning, ma'am.
The coat, the car, the catchphrase. They sum up his appeal.
Who is that? Lieutenant Columbo, police.
He was chaotic and disheveled, a detective who appeared to stumble his way to the truth.
But I explained.
But appearances can be deceiving. Columbo first shuffled on our screens exactly 50 years ago, in 1968, the year Richard Nixon became U.S. president, and the Beatles sang Hey Jude.
Is this what I think it is?
He was played by actor Peter Falk. The raincoat actually belonged to him.
That was my personal coat, and I just felt comfortable in it. Columbo's don't have a pretentious bone in his body. I like to think that a lot of Columbo is a reflection of my personal taste.
Falk was originally reluctant for Columbo to drive such a distinctive car.
Seatbelts. Where are they?
But when he saw the Peugeot 403 on the Universal Studios lot, he knew it was perfect.
You take care of your car, it'll take care of you.
Just like Columbo, it wasn't flash, it wasn't fast, but it got the job done.
Here we are. We're working perfect yesterday.
Still not convinced that Columbo is the best TV detective?
That's the question.
Subscribe to the official YouTube channel now for more evidence.
You know, I'm very happy you told me that.
Nice. That's a great little promo. I love that one. So this is obviously really different to the debatable film and the Screening Eagle film that we spoke about earlier. This one is voiceover led to start with, and we didn't actually shoot anything for this. This is all kind of archive that's come together. We've made a few little projects like this in the last few years. But how does your approach to editing differ if you're making something like this, which we're not kind of bespoke filming anything for, but we obviously have a wide range of existing archive, versus something which we're going out and filming specifically?
Something like that requires, I think, a very symbiotic relationship with a graphic designer and motion graphics artist, in that we'll have an idea of what we want to say through script, but what points we want to emphasize and what we want to illustrate with graphics will have to be highlighted. I'll have to figure out what footage works best with that quote by looking through that archive. And sort of integrating and teaming up with them to sort of build the best narrative and finding the structures for when graphics come in and when footage is leading everything. But that's really essentially a good editor, I think, is somebody who is good at building a symbiotic relationship, whether it be with a director or with a graphic artist. It's just ensuring that you trust somebody else and that they trust you in delivering a brief or understanding a brief, and really working back and forth to sort of make the best result for the project.
Brilliant. So obviously when we're making things, we're not just working with our directors and producers and people like that. Obviously the brand or the media owner, the client, our clients, are really heavily involved because it's their film at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about the process that we have with our clients. When do they get involved? How much input do they have? Is it kind of the same for everyone, or what would you say to a client that hadn't done this before, but just wanted to kind of find out about a bit more about how it all comes together and whether they actually have any say in what the final output looks like?
I would say to a client that's never done this before is that to trust the instincts of the video team, the editor, the director, because we have done it hundreds of thousands of times, and that if we're making a note saying that the narrative works better sort of this way as opposed to the way that it was originally in the brief that they had signed up for, that they should maybe take that in and think about it. Really, just put them up against each other. That they're the old way or the original way, and the new way, and say, okay, I do agree with you. This is flowing better. This does feel better as an edit.
Great. And if they have a particular preference about something, or if there's some specific frames that we don't like, how does the feedback process work? Is it just a case of sending them the video and calling it a day, or is there kind of a bit of back and forth?
We have quite a bit of internal checks before they go to client. So we'll make a video and then check it internally quite a bit, and then send it to client. And the way we've been doing it through the pandemic, because we don't have that client comes into the office and sees the video firsthand, is that we have a Google Doc, and we're constantly updating it with every round of changes. So the client usually sends us changes into the producer director, and they will, talk to the client about what can be done, what can't be done. Usually they all can be done, but there might be something where the client is asking for, can we hear from this person? And there was no interview shot, so we can't. But usually those notes will be directed to me. I'll do what I can, talk to the director about how, on some instances, I might want to push back on this note because I think it's better for the film in its entirety to challenge the client's assessment of changing this one thing. Sometimes you win those battles, sometimes you lose. There's been, as an editor, you need to know when to sort of just give the client what they wanted in the end. But there have been a number of great instances where I've suggested something to the client, and they've come back and they said, you were right, and the video's better for it.
And do clients appreciate getting involved in an early stage, or do we tend to sort of hold things back and reveal things to them to start with? How much do clients get involved in the creative, in the early edits?
Do you mean like in the version 1 or like?
Yeah, sort of version 1, like thinking rough cuts and things like that. It's never a case of just handing them the video, right? There's always some.
Yeah, there have been a lot of instances where, as an editor, the client wants to be over your shoulder as you're putting it together, right from when you get the footage. That as an editor, I'll say that really hurts your ego a bit, because that's basically, somebody not trusting you to do your job. But so when clients do want to get involved in those early stages, I'm definitely someone who will push back and say, let us have a couple days with it. Let us put it together. Trust us to follow the brief completely. We have your best interests in mind. Don't worry. We appreciate your involvement, and there have been clients, and this is their first video, so we understand that they might be nervous that this comes together exactly how they wanted. But I think if you can float them, sometimes as an editor you're like, you do an interview and you get your selects together. Sometimes you can just send them the selects of the interview. So just to reassure them that what they wanted and hoped to get in the interview is there. So they can sort of rest assured, or somebody can tell their higher up back at the company that, everything looks great and this company's nailing it.
Perfect. I think that's what it comes down to in the end. It's reassurance, and it's obviously our motivation is to protect the client and just to make sure that their best interests are at our heart, and also protect the brand. I think one of the things that often falls down in video productions, if there's not enough time in the edit, it can be a little bit sloppy, it can be a little bit messy, and it doesn't reflect well on the brand. And ultimately, that is what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. If there's any clients, any brands out there listening at the moment, that is basically our number one conversation in the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, throughout the whole process, is how do we not let a brand be embarrassed by a rushed product. So I suppose my last question for you, Ian, if a client or a brand comes and says, look, we want to cut a lot of time in the editing process to save some money, or to just because we want to get it out sooner, what's the response? Is that ever a good idea?
I mean, it can be. It's just a matter of simplifying everything at that point. Like to get things right, it can take time. To put a lot of elements in things to take time. There's always ways that as an editor, I can suggest to simplify things, whether it be creatively or, just making it shorter and shorter. But I'm always, in favor of getting more time to edit things, because it does allow for those moments, like I spoke earlier, to step away from something, really analyze it, and come back and make it 10 times better. But if clients are really rushing to get things out, I've worked many overtime hours, and I know I can do it. But I don't know. It's that old adage of like, you can have something fast, cheap, or good. Pick two of those things, and everybody knows that in the video production world. And like explaining that to clients is something that's quite difficult, but I think it's a universal business structure.
Definitely. Well, hopefully that's something that we've managed to shed a bit of light on today. And I suppose our main takeaway is like I said, just we're trying to protect the brand, and that is why we like to spend time in the edit. That's why we like to spend time doing some internal quality control beforehand. So I see the video first and make notes on it, and Pete sees the video. Graham, our director of content, sees the video. We share it around the company. It's a collaborative process, and but before it gets sent out, even for consideration as a V1, it's already gone through a few rounds of amends. And that takes time, but that's really where the client's return on investment begins to pay off. Because if you spend longer on something, you get a better product because you have more eyes on it, you have more time on it, more time to correct mistakes, and all of that kind of stuff. So ultimately, we just don't really want to cut corners too much. But brilliant. That's pretty much all we've got time for. That was half an hour. That absolutely flew by. So thanks very much for joining me today, Ian. And thanks, everyone, for watching. Tune in next week, where I think Pete might be back. But you never know. I'm finding this chair quite comfortable. So let's call it a day there. And thanks for watching another Never in Life. We'll leave you with our show reel. Thank you very much.
We are Memorin Film and Video,
the world's branded video agency.
2021 Showreel.
Yeah, what's up, Papa?
In 2014, we started a revolution. In 2021, we've turned up the dial. On air and online, across the globe, creating content like this.
What we're trying to do has never been done before.
For brands like these.
It's an absolutely beautiful movie. does take your breath away.
Starting to tear up.
Our story is your story.
Nemarin.